Full time today. Good to be with everybody. My name is Dwayne Brejak. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the executive director for the Michigan chapter of NASW, and I help coordinate some of these student series from the national lens. And we are so thrilled to have three panelists with y'all today. And we really hope today will be a group discussion and advocacy opportunity around the 2024 elections. We are real close to it this time. I think we're 17 days out. For all of my Michigan folks that are on, we just had our lead day. This ended about an hour ago. So it's good to see some of you back on a different Zoom meeting for advocacy work. But social work is a political profession. And we know that those who we elect at every level ultimately have decisions that will impact the work that we do to access our clients' have to services, the funding streams that we have for our profession, as well as ourselves as professionals. And so today we're going to be talking about prepping for the upcoming election with 17 days. Really, what can we do? What does pre-election work and maybe even post-election work look like for social workers and social work students? I'm hoping that we'll hear a little bit from y'all about what you've been doing in your states, in your schools, in your agencies. But I will introduce briefly our three organizers here today, and then we'll get started. So I really have the honor and privilege of introducing you all to three of our national PACE organizers. This year, NASW hired 5 organizers in kind of swing states to help with election organizing and social work voter mobilization. We know that some of the folks that are on will directly relate to the state you're in, but we want to mobilize social workers on a larger scale, not just in the couple of states that we're able to have somebody at the national level in. Our first organizer is Silas Ortiz, who is with the NASW-Ohio Chapter. Silas was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and received a BSW from Kentucky State University. While at Kentucky State, Silas was the NASW Kentucky BSW representative, as well as an intern, and recently graduated from the University of Michigan School of Social Work, Go Blue, where they interned with me at the NASW chapter office. So great to have Silas here. James Rawson is the Michigan chapter PACE organizer. And during his time with NASW, he's going to be working to mobilize our voters here in Michigan, as well as our surrounding states. And while a student at Michigan State University helped organize with the Macro Social Work Student Association, worked on game night clubs, and Feed CMU during his time at Central Michigan University. James is a brand new licensee in Michigan as of today with his macro level limited license. So we're very excited to have James in that boat. James began his social work journey at Lansing Community College when a social worker observed his interest in people rather than numbers. And he earned his bachelor's degree in social work from Central Michigan University and master's degree from Michigan State University, focusing on organizing and community leadership. And finally, we have Kiana Robinson, LSW, and is the political organizer for the Pennsylvania chapter of NASW. Kiana is a licensed social worker based in Philadelphia with extensive experience in DEI and B initiatives, community outreach, child welfare, training facilitation, and organizational policy reform. In her current role, she leads DE&I and B initiatives and curates community events and workshops. She is passionate about empowering social work students and increasing the visibility of the next generation of social workers. So welcome, Silas, James, and Kiana. Let me just pull up our screen and then we will get started with our more formal part of today. All right. So first up, I believe we're going to have Kiana run through some of our values and ethics.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to talk to you all this evening. I didn't put in my bio, which I don't know why, but I did receive my bachelor's degree from Temple and my master's degree from Westchester. So I don't know if I have any Rams or Owls in the house, but I'm definitely representing, if not. I actually wanted to start with a poll first, if possible. I will launch it in a second just to get our juices flowing and to learn a little bit from you all. Okay, so if everyone can just go through the poll and answer the questions, so we can get a better understanding of who's in the room.
Just so folks who are seeing it, there's a couple questions in here. Have you ever helped somebody register to vote? What's the biggest barrier to voting in your community? How do you usually stay informed about elections? And what role do you think social workers should play in voter mobilization?
So for the first question, have you ever helped someone else register to vote? It seems like half of the room is saying yes. And then the rest of the half is split between no, but I'd like to, or no, I'm not sure how to. Okay. And then the second question, what is the biggest barrier to voting in your community? It seems like almost half is saying lack of interest. And then we have lack of information, access to polling locations, long wait times, and then other. That makes sense. If you do put other, I would love to know what other is. So if you can add that in the chat, that would be great. And then number 3, how do you usually stay informed about elections, social media, news outlets, friends and family, advocacy groups, and then other? Again, if you put other, please put that in the chat so that we know. And then lastly, what role do you think social workers should play in voter mobilization? The bulk of us are saying all of the above. And then we have educating clients about voting, advocating for voting rights and policies, hosting voter registration events, and then none of the above. Awesome. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to end the poll now, but I will look in the chat really quick to see if we have any others. No, we don't have any others. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for participating. I hope y'all feel kind of in the spirit of voter mobilization. So we can't talk about what social work students can do prepping for the election without talking first about our values and ethics. So I am going to just quickly read through the preamble. The primary mission of the social work profession is to enhance human well-being and help meet the basic human needs of all people, with particular attention to the needs and empowerment of people who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. A historic and defining feature of social work is the profession's focus on individual well-being in a social context and the well-being of society. Fundamental to social work is attention to the environmental forces that create, contribute to, and address problems in living. So our 6 core values of social work are service, social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, integrity, and competence. And when I think about civic engagement and getting involved in, the political process and what directly impacts our communities, I think of the 2. I think they all relate, but I think the first 2 kind of relate a little bit more: service and social justice. If our primary goal is to help people in need and to address social problems, and then if we also are called to challenge social injustices, how can we do that efficiently without being politically involved, without being aware civically, without being kind of at the front lines advocating? I just don't think that that's possible to really live out our core values and our ethical principles without really doing those things. So if we just want to keep that in mind as we work through this workshop, I think that would really, set the tone and the foundation. We can go to the next slide, please.
So when we think about social work and policy, one of the things I wish was explained to me when I was a student is, does social work actually have positions on policy issues? And the answer is yes. NASW, as an organization, we have positions on almost all of the major policy issues that come up in social work practice. I mean, as social workers, we care about a lot of things. And so it's important for us as a profession to be thought out about what are our values, how do certain policy positions align or not align with social work? How do we look at evidence-based practice? How might that look different state to state? And so what I wanted to just briefly touch on, so this does a bit relate to elections, but also internal to our profession. How do we make decisions about our own policy priorities as a social work profession? And so that, for some of you, this might be familiar information. For some of you, this might be brand new. But we have this really handy dandy book called Social Work Speaks, which actually outlines all of our policy positions as an association and as a social work profession. So every 3 years, there is a voting block of social workers. Every state gets a certain amount of voting members that are voted on at their NASW chapter level that review, update, and then vote on certain policy positions. There's about 150 total policy positions. Every 3 years, there's a certain amount of them that come up for revision. You can see on this slide here, these are the ones that are up for votes, or actually, I think voting ends tomorrow on these particular voting positions, policy positions. And they're really important ones, right? You see the death penalty, disasters, electoral politics, LGBTQ+, homelessness, racism, social justice, big areas of social work. And within each one of these policy positions, there is kind of social work history, what sort of recommendations, current research and literature on each one of these. Yeah, Joe, exactly. You know, some of these are also ones that maybe we're not talking about that often, but do come up in many parts of social work, like end of life decision. And we're seeing some transformative work being done in different states around end of life kind of decision making. So thinking about like how internally as a social work student, what is your role also in internal policy making of our profession? When these policies come up for review every 3 years, whichever ones are up, you as a social work public member can go make comments on suggestions on what wording should be added or tweaked, if there's new policies that should be created. So in total, there's 227 delegates across the country. My state of Michigan gets 9 delegates. It's kind of based off of how many social workers and how many members are in your particular state. But you can also run for a delegate position in your state, even as a student. If you are a policy kind of wonk, if you really care about looking and reviewing this sort of information. The other piece that is attached to our delegates is the Code of Ethics. So the Code of Ethics is also up for potential revision every 3 years. And we want to make sure our social work community is involved in our ethical standards revision. So there's opportunities to run for delegate positions in your state, to provide public comment period or amendments to existing statements. So all that whole list that I just had on the last slide, those all had periods where there's public comment period. And proposing new statements. And this kind of just shows you what it would look like if you wanted to propose something new in the future. But we want to make sure our social work community is engaged in our policy process. And then in turn, when we're in an election year, like we are now, when we're looking at candidates to potentially support, we go back to, do these candidates align with the policies that have been approved by our broader membership within the social work community? And so it's really important that we have continual feedback from our social workers on a whole range of things that social workers care about. So that is just a brief little snippet about some of the policy experiences and opportunities within the national landscape. There will be a new Social Work Speaks book out in 2025, because after this round of folks, policies get approved at the end of tomorrow, then it will go for a new publication. So be on the lookout. If you're still in your social work programs, then you may have an opportunity to get access to that, or they're available to purchase if you're interested in having a copy. I always have a copy in my office, right? Actually, it's always right next to my desk, but this is the version I have, and you can see it's tabbed pretty regularly when I get calls from legislators or for newspapers who are like, hey, does social work have a position on this? Or we've got a bill up for testimony. Should NASW be taking a position on things? Well, I can go back and say, hey, our members have voted, and this is what we think is important to be talking about and taking a position on at this time.
Thank you for explaining that so perfectly, Dwayne. So now we're going to talk about empowering clients through political engagement and agency advocacy. So as I'm talking, please be thinking about how can social workers and social work students help clients become politically aware and active, and also feel free to write in the chat your thoughts. So I have a couple touch points here, such as education and information, skill development, facilitating discussions, connecting to resources. These are all things that as social workers and social work students, maybe in our field placements or in our internships or even just throughout the community, honestly. These are things that we kind of do naturally and that we're learning to do as students. So, for example, education and information, it's really important to understand the barriers and boundaries that might present itself through the organization that you are working in or that you're doing your internship hours through. And it's important to understand how that directly impacts the clients that you're working with and the clients that you're serving. Because in the event that something were to come up, you would be able to adequately educate and inform that client on the certain things and how to really navigate these barriers and boundaries efficiently. Skill development, that's not just for your client, but that's also for you. You want to make sure that you're continuing to be involved in professional development opportunities. You want to make sure that you are also advocating for your clients to be able to improve these skills. So maybe that is learning how to read more efficiently. Maybe that's learning how to write if you're supporting them with those things. These are things that you can advocate as you're working with your clients. Facilitating discussions through your agency with coworkers or just with the client, asking them about their voting plan, asking them, just what their not specifically stances are, but just where they are as far as if they, have a plan to vote or if they need support in getting around. Maybe I know that in the poll we talked about transportation, getting to the poll. So maybe that's okay. You would like to vote. Let me look into resources so that you can get to the polling place. And that's a way to really advocate for them as well. And then also connecting to resources. So, is there any other, I guess, direct scenarios that you might have experienced throughout your time thus far, either in your field placement or internship, or just that you might have seen other people engage in? Any specific situations that you might feel like um, talking about? I know Cheryl said, I just feel given the polarization of this election and the way it's playing out, it is a trigger for many. That's very true. And just making sure that you are acknowledging that and treading lightly when necessary. That's a really good point, Cheryl. Does anyone else?
With
Oh,
the
go ahead.
polarization, I was gonna just mention, one strategy you can take with that is so much of the polarization is with the national election. And so bringing things back to local issues, local politicians that maybe don't get that such polarization. We were talking kind of before we started about, James, Kiana, and I are in like pretty competitive swing states. And I know those of you who are in a similar boat, like we're just getting inundated with really terrible ads. Some of them are transphobic, anti-immigrant, anti-women, like pretty blatantly gross to watch. And it's like nonstop. And it really is hard to see that. And it turns people off of elections. So I think talking to people about, hey, what do you care about? Like what issues are important to you? And do you know that actually like the local school board or the local city council person is probably going to be more important, maybe not more important, but you're going to see that relationship more regularly than maybe even the president, right? Like they get all the news and the attention, but you're going to feel the impacts of that local election probably more regularly. Yeah, so just thinking about reframing sometimes that narrative and acknowledging that yes, it is polarizing and we're all feeling that effects. And I think talking to people, that may be what you're doing with your internships or even with your friends and your family is we're all kind of waiting for November 5th to be done, right? But how do we make sure people can talk about what they're really feeling and what they care about?
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I think just having those conversations all throughout the year for every election, like you mentioned, doing the local and the state elections as well. I think that that also can help us learn how to navigate these conversations with elections that aren't exactly being so in your face, right? Just the ones that aren't a gazillion ads that are very hurtful to people. That is definitely a way to really learn how to navigate that space as well. Just get that conversation going. And I love that Silas dropped the go-to fact checking website. I know that also too, we're going to talk more about resources towards the end. Carissa said educating people on how certain policies specifically impact them is really helpful. It really is. Are there any other specific examples or things that come up as we are talking about how to advocate for our clients in our community? Great, we can go to the next slide.
So this is me. Hello all, I'm Silas, they, he pronouns. Gian and Dwayne, almost stealing my thunder as we got into relational organizing, good transition. But I would like anyone in chat just pop in and if you've heard of relational organizing or like kind of know what it is at all. Definitely got a hint on the slide. But I'll just hop in and say it's kind of what Kiana was just talking about, but it's advocacy and organizing in your own social network. So having those conversations day to day with everyone. And I'm just going to give you guys a few tips about how I go about relational organizing. For anyone that's in Ohio, I say I'm from Columbus. I'm kind of from a smaller town actually outside of Columbus called Pataskala. You probably don't know it. It's grown up, let's see, 20,000 people. Very red county, I would say, is Lincoln County. Not a lot of diversity. I'm of Latina descent, and there's about 2% Latina in my county. So growing up there, I have a lot of friends that just grew up not having the diversity that I grew up with, and that can create a strife. Create, because we all are different people, we all have different backgrounds, and that really affects how we really, step into this political sphere. Because if you don't, if you don't know about trans people, you don't know many immigrants or many refugees, it's easy for a politician to other them because you don't have a personal relationship with them. So if you could click real quick, Dwayne. My first thing is I always go in, we discuss, we do not debate. One thing I have with, I will say a friend that he grew up parents mainly watching Fox News, so that really inundated him with the way he was coming from. I was definitely on the opposite side of that, and that created strife. I looked at him a lot of like, and a lot just when I was younger, it's like debating, like, oh, I got to prove them wrong. That's not how politics really works, and that's not how we change people's minds. You change people's minds by communicating with them, being honest, being respectful, and I think that's one of the first things that like Kiana kind of mentioned when having this. Be respectful, like knowing that sometimes just people don't know things. I think a very social work thing is let's go into every conversation, every interaction, not thinking that this person's coming out with ill intent. Because most of the times they're not. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of people scared. Most people in America live paycheck to paycheck nowadays. And when they're told that this group of people, this action is the reason they're living paycheck to paycheck, maybe they don't have the time to actually figure out if that's true or not, and they kind of just accept it, and because it's a little easier than digging for deeper. So I always say, go in having a respectful conversation. I think Dwayne mentioned real quick before is asking what issues matter to them. And the next thing is when I say discuss, don't debate, I don't mean be civil, don't stand up for what's right. When you discuss and you but not debate, you can still very much, and you need to and you should correct them. If they say something racist, transphobic, something that's, wrong, misinformation, correct them. That's a time and don't be like, oh, well, you're a racist because you said that. Be like, okay, well, that's actually false. Here's why, and here's how that rhetoric is actually harmful. And also, harmful rhetoric doesn't just hurt the marginalized people; it hurts people that can be in the oppressive group. We know that misogyny hurts men. We know that racism hurts white people. Like that's how these things are not good and they hurt everyone. So really working with that. Uh, and I'm not only talking about we're talking about your clients. I'm talking about mainly also your friends, your family, people that you are around in your whole time because it's a lot easier. We'll talk later about canvas. James will talk about canvassing, but a big thing is uh, doing these things and people that you already know, you love, and have a relationship with. Uh, so you can because having that relationship, having that strong relationship already is going to allow these conversations to be easier. Allow you to I know that you don't mean to be ill harmed or to be harmful to people. I know that you may just be misguided and let's work together. Join if you just click next. Thank you. The next thing is in person versus online. I know we've through the poll, a lot of people will get their information through social media. Personally, I have a thing. I don't really do any political discourse online. That's how I do my self care. I do take in information at points from social media and online, but I find it's more helpful to have conversations in person, but also recognizing that not everyone can have in-person conversations. Some people, they're more apt to do advocacy through online. One of the things I always say about doing online is when we're fighting misinformation, it's big not to share any of those. So I know on Facebook and Twitter, you can do like a quote. I advise against that. What I would say, if you find misinformation and you want to speak out against it, take a screenshot and then make your own post. Just so you don't give more. You don't want to give more traffic to the misinformation. You want to, but you do want to debunk it to the people that follow you. But being online, you just have to be more careful and more direct and more what's the word? Just direct and clear and respectful with your communication. You kind of double down than you're in person because there's a little barrier. I see we have a hand up. Amanda, do you have a question? Please come off mute or put it in chat, please.
Sorry, I accidentally raised my hand.
Oh, all good. But yeah, and then if you go to the next bullet point, Dwayne.
Silas, could I just add one thing about the online?
Yeah.
Maybe two things. Don't be a troll. Maybe that's too basic to say, but be very careful about what you post online because employers will look, or future employers will look at your social media. So make sure you know what's visible on what you post too. If you've got some, have one of your friends unfriend you and then see what they can see, do something together, Google yourself, make sure what you want out there is what you want the public and your professional life to be. And it's not inappropriate to be political online as a social worker. Like that's part of my identity as a social worker, but you want to have accurate information. You want to be sharing from good sources and you want to be able to stand behind what you post. And if you post something wrong, own that too, because there is sometimes information gets out there that feels really real, and then suddenly you realize it maybe a part of it wasn't fully accurate, and it's okay to acknowledge that truth as well. And yeah, I see Maya's comment on social media can be a very helpful tool, and it is unproductive to dismiss it. Yeah, absolutely, right. People are getting their information from social media, so we have to be aware of like the tools where folks' information is coming from. But yeah, absolutely be careful about your social media, specifically what you're posting or what you're commenting on, because that stuff can be traced back to you. And just depending on the sorts of jobs you have or might want in the future, just make sure you're thinking about that.
So the next thing I'll say is find time. One thing I always do, and I've done this election cycle, is just finding time to have one-on-one intentional conversations with my friends and family. Whether that is sometimes, on the golf course with some friends, driving to a friend's place to watch some football, having a conversation. Especially if you are a political person. I know in my friend group, I'm the political guy. So people will come and ask you questions, and being that person To be like, yeah. And also, there's points where my friends will ask me questions. I'm like, I'm not really sure about that topic. But I'll definitely, take my time to find that out and relay it to you. I have a friend who also just moved down to from Michigan this past year. I made sure to find time to make sure he was getting registered to vote, make sure that he had everything, because for ones that don't know, Ohio voting laws are a little complicated about how to get registered to vote. Not the best, but helping him through that process of like, yes, this is all you need. This is where you can go. He has to get Ohio ID license. I'm like, oh well, if you ask, we have a passive voting law, which passive means you have to ask. But if you go to the DMV, when you get your license, just ask for a voter registration. They can get registered in the same day. So just be intentional. Find time to really talk with people, and respectful. Find time. Be intentional. Uh, and that's just the way. It's not gonna be a quick process. But this is how we slowly but surely change people's minds and create a better world for the future. So the next thing we're gonna start with a poll. That's not a poll. Uh, so yeah. Uh, so yeah. Do you have a voting plan? Yes or no? And Brenna, that is a good point to make because the internet as a resource is different than social media. Mainly when I was saying online, I do mean online, like online communication, which is mainly through social media. But yeah, I do. It is important to note that there is a lot of good online resources uh, to find information. Okay, so it's pretty good. So we have about like a third, a quarter, 3/4 of us have a voting plan. So this is great. So I'll get into for our quarter of friends about who don't have a voting plan, and it's also a good practice of how to talk to people that don't have a voting plan. So the first thing is, and it's also you can find a lot of these resources at Vote 411. They have resources for each state, so it's really great for everyone. Uh, and I do want to know, someone mentioned that they have clients that have felony records or undocumented. Don't know what state you are in, but in some states, there are non-citizens who can vote in school board elections, which is pretty big. And then also in some states, people who have been convicted in felony. I'm not sure about New Jersey, but there's some people that can vote with a former felony charge. So just make sure that we're looking at our own state and finding out the laws there can really help us. So the first thing is first check if you're registered to vote. Every state's also different on when the deadline is to register to vote. In Ohio, it was just the October 7th, the first Monday of October was the last day to register to vote. Some states like Michigan, I believe you can register day of election day. So it's a lot nicer. So knowing that, yeah, same. Heather also in the state of Texas, it was October 7th. So the first thing is, so also I will say, make your voting plan and talk to people about your voting plan as soon as possible. So first, check if you're registered to vote, and learn about your voting options. There's absentee, there's early, in person, by mail. Again, pointing to Michigan, they have this cool new system where you have 9 days of early voting at your polling location. I know here in Ohio we have early voting. But early voting is at the Board of Elections in your county, so it's a little harder to get to. Yeah, so learning about your voting options is big. Then explore your day of voting options. So day of, when do the polls close? How far is it from your work, from your house, from your school? Is it possible that you can vote there? Is it going to be a time crunch? If it's a time crunch, probably look at early voting or absentee. Excuse me. So really explore that and look at what's the best option. Because at the end of the day, we want everyone to vote. So go with your safest option. If you're not sure you're gonna make it day of, try your best to do absentee or in person, uh, or in person early voting. I will also say, look at your absentee. What does absentee look like? In Michigan, I point to Michigan a lot because I used to live there. You get your absentee mailed to you. In Ohio, you get an absentee application mailed to you, and you have to apply for your absentee. So knowing if you have to apply for your absentee or if you just get it is very important. Very important for anyone in your social network to know. So then, what do we do next? Okay, so maybe we know how we're going to vote in person. We're going to go in early this Friday. So okay, I know I'm going to go vote this Friday at my board of elections. What do I do next? Okay, I'm going to research candidates and ballot initiatives. I'm going to make sure I know the ballot. I know in Ohio and most states, you can look up a sample ballot where you can see everything. And obviously, if you have your absentee, you have it right there in front of you already. So you can look at what the ballot initiatives are. I know some places put in there's a ballot initiative in the state of Kentucky to decide if undocumented immigrants can vote in the local school board type of elections. I know there's a couple in Kentucky. In Ohio, we have a couple big ballot issues. Some about transportation, some about gerrymandering. So really research. I also shared earlier Ballotpedia is what I look at when I'm looking at elections a lot. League of Women Voters also has a lot of information that's nonpartisan. If anyone else has a lot of some good information that's nonpartisan, please feel free to drop it in chat. But there's a lot. You can also look at NASW PACE. I know Ohio, we've posted our endorsed candidates and our voting guides. So usually there is a voting guide. Also another important date that's put October 15th. So yeah, so Wisconsin already passed. So again, for next election cycle, make sure we know these dates can always help. So after you have your candidates, you know who you feel confident who you're going to vote for, what ballot issues you're going to vote for, know how you're going to vote. Share your plans. Put it on social media. Hey friends, I'm going to be voting in person, and you should vote too. Here's how to make your voting plan. So also, as we're talking about this, let's put this actually into practice. How do you plan to vote? There's going to be a poll. In-person, absentee, early voting, and mail-in are all options. We see a lot of in-person. Love to see that. Making sure also, I know OSU is doing a new thing this year. They have voting locations on campus. So make sure you do an in-person that you know your polling location and your polling hours, I will say. And knowing the laws, there's a lot of times where, I know it happens with students a lot. So I do want to mention this. If you're in line at the polling location, stay in line, even if the poll is closed, so you get your vote counted. So yeah.
Well, and with that, Silas, too, it really is going to vary state by state and city by city what your voting experience is going to be, right? Most of my voting life, living in a rural space, I walk in and out of my polling place. No wait, never have. And this year, Michigan has expanded because we had a voter rights amendment on our ballot a couple of years ago. So we've really expanded voting options. I already voted absentee. Like Silas said, they sent it to me. I voted a couple of weeks ago. It's already done. Now I can help the people that I know struggle with voting or getting to the voting, their polling location. I can plan to have that day, and I'm giving my whole staff off election day to do whatever volunteering work or poll work that they want to do, to make sure that they can support folks, because we have it pretty good in our state now, but it's not going to be the same. I mean, I know we saw in Georgia in the last election cycle, people were waiting for 12 hours at a polling location, and now they've even put in restrictions where you can't get water or have food, right, brought to you while you're in line at polls. So there are kind of these restrictive voting mechanisms in some of the states. And so this is also where just being aware of what you might expect and letting people know, if this is their first time voting, sometimes people are nervous and think that it's going to be a big process, and really it's not. You just fill in some bubbles once you actually get into the room and you're pretty much done in 2 minutes. And for most states, they allow you to also bring in a ballot. Like if you want to, in Michigan, you can go on our Secretary of State's website, you can print off your whole ballot. You can highlight the candidates that you want ahead of time, the proposals you want. And so you already have your cheat sheet guide when you go into the voting booth. And sometimes just having that sense of, hey, when I get there, I want to know exactly what to expect, what the experience is going to be like. And for that first time, especially if you're working with fellow students, this is a really good opportunity, or clients who might not have voted, walking through what that process is going to look like for them and making them feel a little bit better about what to expect can be a really empowering tool that you all could use.
If we go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. And the next thing is election protection. Just as Dwayne said, sometimes it's going to be hard to vote. So again, with election protection, again, check if you're registered to vote, especially if you're not sure if you are. Please check if you're registered, because in some states you can still register. So on election protection, the website's 866rvote.org. But there's plenty of voting resource. There'll be resources for each state about to track your absentee. One of the big things I'll say is, and I'll talk about a little bit with being a poll monitor, is there sometimes people are turned away from the polls. So if you happen to be turned away from the polls, or anyone you know is turned away from the polls, please give them this number. There's two, the 866-R-VOTE, also the ones without the letters, 866-687-8683. There are people and lawyers that will be on call that'll be able to help track people through and help them through the process if they're turned away from the polls. And also, if you're turned away from the polls, the simple thing is always ask to cast a provisional ballot. They have to, by law, give you a provisional ballot. There's no they can't not get you. Now, if that provisional ballot is counted, it's a different story. And on here, you'll if you go to the website, you'll be able to learn how to track a provisional ballot if you have to cast one. But that is very big to know. For anyone that's not voting day of and is able to, I know we have a lot of great things about being a poll worker, and we're gonna James. I'm not gonna steal his thunder there, but being a poll monitor is pretty cool. I plan to be a poll monitor. It's not full day. So I know for in Ohio, you have to be a full day to be a poll worker. So poll monitor, you can do time sections. You're outside the 100-yard electioneering zone, and you're there to be that person to help if anyone's turned away from the ballot. So you're there to connect them to people. You're there to help make sure everyone is franchised and is able to vote. So if you do have the opportunity, I would strongly push you to be a poll monitor and just be a helpful part of this democracy. And that's all I have from my side.
Okay, this one's me. So I want to do a little giveaway. So I always love some freebies. So I'm curious, and we're going to give away one of these social workers political t-shirts. So can anyone name me one of the 5 social workers in Congress? Quick Google. Barbara Lee. Kevin. Yes. Debbie Dingle, incorrect, but first name correct. Debbie Dingle is one of our Congress folks, although Debbie Dingle does not have a social work degree. Debbie Stabenow is our senator from Michigan with a social work degree. Barbara Lee is a congresswoman from California's 13th district. You might have seen Barbara Lee actually at the Olympics. She was one of the folks who was the closing ceremony as it's coming to LA in 2028. Kirsten Sinema, yes, one of our MSWs, independent from Arizona. Hillary Skolton is also from Michigan, BSW in the Michigan 3rd. And yes, Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia from Texas. So we have only 5 BSWs or MSWs in Congress right now. And 3 of them are leaving in November. So we will be down to maybe 2. Hillary Skolton is up for re-election in Michigan, and it's a pretty competitive district, although my bet would be on her at this point. But for being the first one, Kevin, you have won our shirt. So I'm just going to put my email into the chat. If you could just email me your shirt size and address, that would be great. And I'll get that out to you ASAP. But we want more social workers in elected office. And as we think about how do we as social workers get more of the policies that are friendly to our profession passed, whether that's reimbursement rates, clients' access to services, voting rights, LGBT rights, women's rights, all the things, right? Part of it is we need more of us in seats at the table, whether that's in state legislature or in the US Congress. And it's really sad that we will be down to likely only two come January. So hopefully there's some folks who can step into those roles in the future, and hopefully some of you on the call will be in those spaces. I'm just curious, while we're just talking about this, are any of you following any local races that social workers are running in that we should be giving a shout out to? I'll just leave a minute for the chat to get thinking about that. We have about 10 social workers in Michigan running for various offices, so we're excited to see a whole group of folks from the city level to we've had actually Michigan's a weird state politically right now. We've got a social worker in the U.S. Congress, in the Senate, the House. We have 4 in our Michigan House and 2 in our Michigan Senate. Yeah, Washington County, we have a social worker running for sheriff. Like, there's a lot of weird spaces going on. But we want to have more social workers in political spaces all across the country. So, you know, if you're not connected to your NASW chapter, absolutely do that, because they will know likely who's running locally and that have social work degrees. And those are usually our priorities to make sure we get elected, and then candidates who also support social work values.
See, this is my section. Thank you, Dwayne. And thanks to Silas. So before I begin devolving into my slides, I have a little quick poll. Sorry for the delay. And that is no. Apologize. Someone else is quicker than me, or why don't we just skip the poll? But if you want to put in the chat on how you are getting involved in elections, I mean, I would like to quickly just get a feel. So if you want to just put something in the chat, it'd be all right. And if, oh, we got, thank you. We just put,
I love the yapping on Instagram storage comments. Ian.
yeah, I like that. Advocating for those who are homeless. Oh, all right, we're getting some answers. Let me, oh, all right. I'll just give it a minute. You're right about advocating for homeless. It's essential to voice for those who are voiceless. But 17, just give it 6 more seconds. Knocking on doors, yeah, definitely. Home baking if you're comfortable. Let me just see what oh. We got. All right, educating on others on other on social media. I see getting involved in your agency, which is very good. So let me stop there. So let's go to my slides, but I'm glad that people are getting involved, and it's essential that, I mean, our code of ethics say that we do need to get involved, but how you get involved is not prescribed. So I'm going to share in a link in the chat, a link for if you want to further get involved in the language of how we describe Section 604, Section Social and Political Action. But basically, we want you to get involved in PACE, which is Political Action for Candidate Election. Supports candidates aligned with NASW values. We encourage members to vote through our through field organizers, and we provide political training for NASW members. And how we do that is that PACE Board endorses presidential and federal candidates by evaluating and values and policies they support. For chapter PACE, chapters will support candidates who will uphold values and ethics of our profession. We support state and local races through endorsements. Examples of endorsements are through social media advertisements, and our engagement practices are recommended candidates but are more focused on mobilizing social workers to vote. I see we have a question in the chat. Which candidate is in alignment with our values? For example, we have endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. She is our PACE. She has been endorsed by PACE. I know on the Michigan's in my state, we have endorsed Representative Hillary Skelton. Okay, no problem. But we do have lots of candidates that we look through surveys that we determine that are aligned with our values. But if you can go to the next slide, Dwayne.
James, can I just add one thing to this piece
Sure.
here? So in terms of endorsements at the NASW level, one of the things I think to keep in our brains as social workers, and probably as just as humans, is there's likely no candidate that we're going to align 100% with on every policy issue, right? Because people are complicated, policies are complicated, party politics are even more complicated. So how NASW approaches endorsements is candidates need to fill out a questionnaire which has specific questions related to policy issues that were outlined in that kind of delegate assembly, that first part of what I talked about. Here are the key priority areas for us as an association. How do you as a candidate align with these 5-6 things? Then the committee, which is made up of volunteer members, either at the state level or at the national level, review a candidate's background, their voting record, their likelihood of winning a race, as well as endorsements, where their funding is coming from, kind of the whole picture of what a candidate looks like, and then makes a decision based off of kind of all of those factors. And the PACE committees at either the national or the state level can then choose to either endorse, not endorse, or just leave sometimes there is double endorsements. So in Michigan, at our level, we've endorsed both Democrats and Republicans in some of the same districts, because we find that they're both pretty good candidates and they may be in 50-50 districts. So either one wins. It's partially about relationships as well. You don't want to burn a bridge as an organization with somebody who very well could be in office, but you also don't want to support somebody who's not going to ever vote for you on anything. With that, regardless of a PACE endorsement, NASW, we work with our members to engage the legislature year round, right? Because know at the state levels, at least, that these are the folks who are voting on the things like voting rights or all the things that we care about. So regardless of party, we're going to have to work with whoever, right? But our values and our policy positions are outlined kind of through our code of ethics and our social work speaks. But being somebody who's worked with the chapter PACE committee quite intensely, it's not always an easy decision, right? And there may be a really bad policy that somebody has, and maybe they're really great on 80% of things. And so it really becomes do we endorse this person? Or maybe we endorse them and also say, hey, we're endorsing you. However, we are watching this particular area. We'd like for you to be stronger in this, right? And so that's also where that relationship building is really important long-term, because while it feels very partisan to choose a Democrat, Republican, or independent, our state politics can shift pretty greatly depending on what state we're in. And so you have to be able to work with folks, even if you don't endorse them, ultimately. All right.
So ways to get involved in the elections or campaigns is definitely poll work. They're a key part of the election process. They help manage the voting process and help voters at local polling sites. They ensure elections are accessible, accurate, and fair. And there are rewards for being a poll worker. You can learn more about the voting process, and you are financially compensated. For poll watcher, they bring election transparency. Purpose is to ensure their party has a fair chance in the election. And generally, they are appointed by a political party. So we'll definitely share that link within the slide for later on. But if you want to go on to the next slide.
Has anybody been either a poll worker or a poll watcher on the call?
Say a hand up. I know I have, and it was really satisfying.
Which one were you, James?
This is that was back in 2010. It was a full day, but it was just enjoying to see people participating in voting.
Was that a poll worker role or a poll watcher?
Yeah, poll worker.
Yeah, and I know that the states, actually, honestly, this year, there's a lot of states that are like begging people to be poll workers. And I have even seen there are some states that are mandating almost like jury duty. They're selecting people in the community to be poll workers because there haven't been enough people that have signed, partially because of some of the huge negative impacts of the last election and how some of the poll workers were attacked online after the election cycle. The poll watcher, I was a poll watcher in 2020. And I'll say that really just means you sit quietly in like the corner of a voting location and you just watch to make sure that there's nothing fishy going on. Usually the Democrats, the Independents, and the Republicans can all, or the Green Party can all have a representative there if they choose, to make sure that there's nothing weird going on. And that's really like it for a whole day. It was a good experience. Nothing happened at my location, so it was kind of a boring day, which I guess is good. What you want. And so that's kind of what poll watching is you're just there as an observer to make sure that there's nothing fishy going on at your location. Yeah, I appreciate James putting the link in here about being poll watchers. That's also where you can connect with your local party, and they often are the ones who assign the poll watchers at the locations.
So, as I said, we are the National Pace Committee is endorsing Kamala Harris. They're proud to endorse Kamala as president. The vice president is proven champion for the people and socials alike, including those who we serve under leadership. Her record on healthcare, mental health services, LGBTQ rights, and criminal justice reforms speaks volumes. We call on you to vote for and organize with VP Harris as our 47th president. As NASW stands with her. So thank you.
So this slide, I wanted to include, as we kind of get to whatever questions you all might have or resources to share. This election is ugly, right? Like, especially at the top. It's not been fun to watch or experience, but it's important, right? So we kind of all have to live in this uncomfortable, anxiety-producing space. And so macro burnout and political organizing burnout is also real in social work. I know a lot of my friends who were involved in political work really had to find other careers, at least the last few years, folks who moved out to DC to do lobbying work. And so finding ways to kind of balance some of what you might be feeling. And for others of you, like myself, like getting involved with campaigns is actually my self-care. So instead of just being anxious about everything I see, I actually can do something, even if it's filling out postcards with a campaign or putting together yard signs for somebody. It makes me feel like I'm a part of the process and or looking at Mudang memes, really. You know, the span is great in terms of how we do self-care in these spaces. And you're right, absolutely, Cheryl. The next couple of weeks, it's going to be ugly because it's so close. And so you're going to start seeing the low of the low in these campaigns. And so if you're if you've never gotten involved in a campaign, my advice is find the person that you actually like the most, the candidate that resonates with you. Could be local, could be federal, right? Whatever that is, reach out to them. Oftentimes on their websites or on their social medias, they'll have really easy ways to get involved and start there. Because if you're not somebody who wants to make phone calls or door knocking, there are opportunities to still be engaged in the work. Or maybe you're somebody who loves talking to people, and that going door to door or making phone calls is going to be a really good fit for you. If it is, especially these next 3 weeks, they want you. They want those people who can do the phone banking and the texting campaigns. But all these campaigns already have scripts developed. They have platforms. You don't have to come in with any talking points. They will give you everything you need to be engaged in the process. It's helpful if you do your own research and make sure you know why you're there. Why do you care about that person, that campaign, that race, whatever it might be? And that can be part of what you build into your talking points. And honestly, yes, exactly, James, every little bit helps. These candidates, some of them will win by 10 votes. We had one of our city council races that I knew the person who was running who literally won by 1 vote. Right? You hear about that as like an outlier, but it does happen, especially in these local races. We had one of our social workers in our house who lost her race by about 100 votes a few years back. And that's really disappointing because there's not very many social workers like we know. And so it's like, if we would have just gotten 5 more people to door knock, right? Maybe that would have flipped that district in that year. Cheryl, after work and general's practicum, I literally don't want to talk to everyone. Absolutely. So there are things you can do that you don't got to talk to anybody. You don't have to interact with anybody. There are virtual ways to be engaged in this work. Maybe, you can help folks create social media. Maybe you really love Canva, right? Or you can help a candidate with their website, or maybe you're connecting somebody through email. There are some things that you can do that you don't actually have to be that social at the end of the day. Curious, what for James, Silas, Kiana, what are you also doing for self-care in your states?
Yeah, I can hop in. Currently, I will say I am missing a basketball game right now for this webinar because me and my friends are doing a basketball league every Thursday, and that's what we're doing for self-care. So, I also, like earlier today, I went with my sister to shoot some hoops, get some good exercise. I don't think about politics that much when I'm playing basketball, I will say. Maybe it slips in my head, but, gets my mind off things. I also you can see by my headset, I'm a big gamer. Tomorrow, me and my friend are going to go door knock for Sherrod Brown. And then after, the new Mario Party has come out. So we're going to go play that after. So playing video games, hanging with family. I think one of the things you kind of mentioned, Joanne, is like, the stuff, it's not great being inundated with all these like hateful messages. So I think there's a part of self-care that I always do, just talking about it with my friends and family. Like, yeah, we all in agreement that we don't like this, and just find that community there is always nice. But yeah,
I would say I turn off the TV, turn off the radio, just get into nature, listen to the sounds of the birds. I find it's not always good to listen to the rhetoric all the time. Sometimes you just got to tune in, tune out. And then when I feel more relaxed, then I get back into the political.
I feel like I haven't been as consistent in the gym as I've been the past couple weeks. I definitely wake up early to go to the gym and just stay active because it definitely is a release. And then around 8:30, 9 o'clock, I'm off social media. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. Mac problems. So yeah, I definitely get off social media at 8:30, 9 o'clock. I'm not really responsive to phone calls, text messages. I'm just reading my books. Might be coloring in a coloring book, just definitely something that isn't really too engaging in the mind. And my books are also fiction. I'm not reading a lot of nonfiction or biographies or things like that because I just want to just kind of transport to another place. So that's definitely what I've been doing lately, and spending time with family as well.
Yes, and family during election year might be an anxiety relief or an anxiety producer, depending on your family too. So that's also just like knowing what your circle is and what you can handle at any given moment. Because honestly, having conversations with family might not be great for your mental health for the next couple of weeks, depending on how your circle is, right? And that's also your clients. And I wanted to just go back to, I can't remember exactly what the comment was, but there's a lot of election anxiety that are coming up for folks. And if you're being in your internship or you're working with clients who show up and ask, hey, I'm feeling this way, or how are you voting? Like if a client asks you that, like how do you respond, right? Or if you are coming in to your internship or your classroom with election anxiety, how are you processing that, right? Do you have a social support network? Do you have other students, faculty that you can talk honestly with? Are you talking about this with your supervisor at your internship, right? Has your agency told you whether or not you get election day off? And does that count towards your hours? Do you have class on election day? Hopefully not, or maybe they're giving you extra credit to do something, right? But these are real questions that and conversations that we know are coming up. Laura, I see your hand, please. I see the hand went down, so maybe that was just an errant hand.
We have a question in chat.
Yes.
Someone they asked, they're watching with their social work students now. Would you please share where and how someone can start engaging today for the elections? What I'd say for me is start at your local county. Just finding their like I live in Lincoln County in Ohio, so Lincoln County Democrats. It's more of a rural county, so they definitely are always looking for volunteers. There's especially so we're 19 days from the election. There's an event every day from now until November 5th. There is going to be a million events, just informational town halls. There's going to possibly be meet and greets. Like I know Michigan, you got some people up in coming to there to Oakland County this weekend. So I would say start there. And so New York, there's a lot of things obviously going on in New York. So definitely would start there. Also, again, finding out just what races matter to you. I think it can always be a little scary, going door knocking, phone banking. So I always, as I said earlier, with relational organizing, start with your social network. Start with where you're comfortable with talking to people and build that. I also will say we're in the GOTV phase, get out the vote phase. So when you do door knock, you're not really going to that many undecided voters. If you're canvassing for a Democrat, you're not going to many Republican doors. You're going to Democrat doors and just trying to turn people out. Be like, hey, have you voted? Do you want to vote? Do you want to learn how to vote? Do you want to? Here's this vote plan card. Here's why you should vote for these candidates. But it's mainly just trying to get people out to vote. So you're not really going to have any type of if the campaign's done good research, you should not really have any tension with any doors you knock on.
My advice would be, if you haven't already looked at your entire ballot, go to your Secretary of State's website and your voting information, and you should be able to find who is on your ballot. And this is a really good time to make sure you know everything that's going to be on there, because you don't want to show up on election day and realize, oh, there's some ballot things that I've never read before. Or look, there's all of these nonpartisan judicial candidates that I know nothing about, because all the people that get the media attention are the partisan folks, right? And so making sure that you have a plan for your whole ballot and what's on there. And having a collaborative group of people. If this is a classroom, you could have the whole class get their ballots ready and like, hey, let's go look and see what's on our things. Let's talk about these candidates. We can go to their websites or their Facebooks and say, okay, what policy positions do they have on their site that may or may not align with social work values, right? What's the rhetoric that they're using? What do we know about these folks, their voting record? Especially if they've been in office before, a lot of these folks will have records already that are publicly available. If they're more local, some of those folks won't even have a social media account or a website. So those folks are really hard once you get into the local stuff, because the only information you may have to make a decision is maybe a local newspaper interview with candidates, or maybe the League of Women Voters or some of these nonpartisan sites might have information if somebody has filled it out. But that also tells you something about a candidate. If they have no profile anywhere, maybe they're not the right person to vote for. But I highly recommend getting your voting information as early as you can. And yes, do get a buddy, get some friends, partner up together. You know, my mom, she's 66. She's like, she lives in a rural part of northern Michigan. She's like, I need to do something. I'm too anxious this election. Like, what do you have for me, Dwayne? And we live like 3 hours apart. And I was like, you know, go do some postcards. You know, she doesn't want to do door knocking. She doesn't want to phone bang. So she went and got a stack of 200 postcards, and they let them take her. She could take them home. They gave her a script. She just had to bring them back and they would mail them. Like, sometimes getting involved is that easy, and just reaching out to the candidate or the party that you're interested in, they'll give you something to do.
Can I also share that there are also more like nonpartisan resources too? Like I think of Vote ER, Vote Writers, Black Voters Matter, get like all of those things, the social work democracy projects, they have different things that you could go to, maybe bus tours or some type of community outreach events that aren't exactly door knocking or phone calls, phone banking. It's just like a block party or some type of something that's a little bit more digestible if this is your first time really getting involved, and there's just a bunch of resources and things like that that you can really have, and maybe post pictures at the events that just show that you're kind of there and active, inviting your friends, inviting people that you know in the community, and then obtaining those resources that you can then share out with your community. So sometimes getting involved can look like, right, the phone banking, the canvassing, but it can also look like just being active and engaging with members of your community in a more digestible way, or easier way, I guess I can say.
One question that I'd love that Cheryl brought up is, I'm going to phrase it like a question. Are we done after we vote and after the election, or is there still work to be done after?
Definitely a lot of work to do after. I'll answer this. I think there's also, I don't know if we can link this, Dwayne, but when you talk about election anxiety, we did a webinar, I think almost a month ago now, about election anxiety, which we had a lot of good conversations. And I think Joe also puts it a good thing, you know, obviously not done after election. I think one of the best things, best quotes I've ever heard, and it's like a catch-22, but the U.S. and the world will neither be saved nor doomed on November 5th or election day. So obviously voting matters, and every race matters, every election matters. But we know that it's not the final event. It's not the climax. It didn't feel like a climax for sure in like the story, but we know it's still part of the rising action if we're looking at like a plot. That there's going to be something unfolds. There's going to be a new step. Especially now, we're gonna have a new president. There's going to be a new step in the future that we're gonna take. And right now, we don't know what that step is going to be. But either way, no matter who wins, there's going to be people that need social workers that need help. There's always going to be clients. The world's not going to be saved tomorrow. And the world is also going to exist on November 6th. It's going to exist on November 12th, where we need to be there to help whoever needs to be helped. Yeah, I don't know. It's not the best answer because it's kind of like, oh, well, it's going to be the same. And it's not going to be the same. It's going to be different. How it's going to be different, we really don't know. But we know we need to be ready to help in whatever capacity we can.
And I'll say the post-election work is another way that if you want to be engaged, your NASW chapter is a really good space to do that. Your legislative committees that exist at the local level are doing a lot of this. If you want to testify, if you want to help get bills passed, if you're working somewhere and you see that there's access issues to a service, connecting with your local chapter. We had our legislative conference earlier today, and one of our social work presenters who works for a state rep was talking about, a lot of the public doesn't know, you can call your state rep's office and they can often get you access to service quicker. Or if you're been kicked off of a particular service that you think you should have, you can run that through your state rep. And so as social workers, it's really important that we also have ongoing connections with our local elected officials, because sometimes they have power that we don't have access to and our clients don't have access to. And as we're in a global space too, I can just give one example. I was canvassing with one of our federal U.S. House members a couple of weeks ago. And while I was filling out postcards with her, she was trying to get Michigan folks back from Lebanon, right? And so she was talking with us about, okay, this is the process that I have to go through as a state rep. And I wasn't even aware, like, she's like, as a state rep, I can't do it. It has to go through the senator. So now I, as the federal rep, have to work in partnership with one of our US senators to be able to advocate to get this person and their family back here safely. And so, but the more you're involved with these campaigns, the less scary these individuals seem, because they're just regular people, honestly. And elected officials, they come in with whatever their lens is. So they may be a business person, they may be a funeral director, they may be a lawyer, they might be a social worker. And so to expect them to know everything about every issue and to know even anything about social work sometimes is a big stretch. So where social workers can play a really important role long-term in this advocacy process is educating your local and state elected officials about what you do, what expertise you have that you could provide to them, what maybe they need somebody to talk about gerontology services or foster care or developmental disabilities, whatever that issue that you have expertise in. And, you can become an expert witness. You might be called to testify. You may want to do an op-ed. There's a lot of things we can do to engage with our legislatures or put pressure on them to get things passed. So I know we're kind of nearing the end of our time. I'm wondering from our panelists, if you have maybe one piece of advice or one starter thing you would recommend people do over the next couple of weeks, what would you tell folks?
I can start. I'm gonna say be hopeful. Social justice is built on hope. We look at the great leaders like MLK. There's a lot of negativity around the world, but we gotta, be hopeful. And I think really, well, I'll push you. The way I'll push everyone here is the way I was pushed this last summer in my MSW program to push to vision the future that you want, and then work back about how we get there and be hopeful. Don't think when we are in these spaces so easy, well, that's not realistic. Oh, well, that probably will never happen. If we allow ourselves and limit our thinking and our hope and our vision to that's not possible, then it will never be possible. We have to fully believe, have that hope, fully believe that it will be possible. And once you have that vision, start working back. Okay, I have this vision of the policy I want in my whatever that is, local, national, whatever it is. I have that vision. Now start working back. Okay, how do I get there? Take some steps back, and then find some people and get to do some great work. But yeah, be hopeful.
I want to talk to the people who this might be your first election or this might be your first time actually getting involved. I just want to say that your voice definitely matters. If you're a little weary or nervous about getting involved or phone banking, even if you have like a little inkling of doing it, definitely just try it. Try it one time. Even if you just call one person and you're like, okay, no, I'm done. This is it. That's still good enough because you tried, right? And it's still a step in the right direction. And then you can maybe next time in the local election do similar things and just get your feet wet. But I think just really trying and really doing your best. And like James mentioned, nothing is too small, nothing is too little definitely just do whatever it is that you can, whatever it is that you can stomach at this time. Just as long as you're trying your best and giving it your all over the next couple of days, that is really the most important thing. And also talking to your network and circle, just maybe two people, 3 people, whatever it is, but definitely something, and nothing is too small.
Picky big on it. And I'm going to say that the worst thing I've heard is doing nothing. And I've heard social workers say, "Hey, I'm just going to stay wholly out of this." Well, we don't want you to do that. We need you to do at least vote. Just get involved. It's just a little bit. Pick a baby step. And then if you're comfortable, go further. And because social justice is an arc. And wherever your vision is, let's hope it's be the change.
Yeah, thank you all for that advice. And I appreciate everybody for really your active participation. This is some really good stuff in the comments and into the polling today. We've got 17 days this time around, right? We have elections pretty much every year in this country, right? So this is just one opportunity to elect one set of people, that there are going to be other social workers, other candidates that you're going to love or you're going to really not love. And we want to be able to continue to cultivate more and more of our social workers to be in these spaces. So we know we can trust, hopefully, the folks that we elect, and that we can build relationships regardless of political party. I really appreciate Kiana's comment too. And I wanted to get a little plug for our November series, which Kiana will be back for, on overcoming imposter syndrome, which is real in social work. And I think that's also true in the political space. There's a lot of folks who feel like, I don't have the skills to do that, or I can't do that because I'm not X, right? There are so many social work skills that overlap with political engagement. We're empathetic listeners, right? We know how to find accurate resources for people. A lot of us are already connected in political spaces. And so when you think about how to be engaged with folks, start with your circle and then expand out. So we hopefully, we'll see what happens in November. So the imposter syndrome could also just be a venting session, depending on how we all need it to be on the 21st. So I hope we'll all see you there. Please take care of yourself over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a lot regardless of what state you're in. And if you're not in a swing state that you're feeling a lot of pressure, know that regardless of what state you're in, there are swing districts, there are swing candidates, there are candidates that want and need you to be out there, even if it feels like, hey, my vote may not matter because maybe I'm a dot in a district that doesn't vote the way I normally vote. But there are people that want to connect to you, that align with your values, and the more we can build those connections as social workers, the better. And so, yes, absolutely, Joe. Note one more time the ways to get involved with local NASW. So the best way, and I will drop into the chat the link to the chapter level. So if you want to get connected to your local PACE, your local legislative committee, the best way to do that is at your chapter level. And so every state has a chapter of NASW, and that's where you can find ways to connect. I just found it. Drop that in the chat. Okay, there's the link to the chapters. But if you connect to the executive director or whoever the staff is there, they can find a way. And if there's not a really good way for you to connect and you're wanting to build something, I know the chapters really want their members to be engaged in whatever you are passionate about. I know at the end of my lead conference today, I got a message from somebody to say, hey, I want to start an immigration rights advocacy group within our chapter, right? And it was just because we had a webinar on it. And now folks are like, hey, we want to see more visibility at the chapter level, which is great, right? And so bring your passion in, and then that also trickles up to the national in that. Yes, Silas, thank you for dropping yours, James. And Kiana, if you want to drop your information in the chat too for our Pennsylvania folks. So please reach out to us should you need anything going forward. And again, I thank you all for your time, your passion, and for your choice of social work as a profession. And we'll hopefully see y'all in November, and have a good rest of your night, everyone.
I'm trying to get Kiana's link. Hold on for November 21. Give me one moment. Don't end it, please. Can you repost it again? Because I can't scroll up.
Yep, I will do that right
Press that.
now.
Hey, jeez.
Second, Cheryl.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you in November, Cheryl.
The link. I don't have it yet. Okay, I'm gonna scroll up.
I'm looking. Hold on, it's just take a second.
Hold Let's see who gets it first.
Exactly. Internet's done at the end of the day.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I can't find it. Hold on. Can you know one more time again? I can't even scroll up. It's not working for me.
Oh, wait.
All right.
I found it. Let me.
All right. You got it?
Wait,
The
can-
imposters.
I got it. I dropped it in there.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see it. Membership students. I don't see it.
Should be the you'll see overcoming imposter syndrome under the upcoming sessions. It'll be like that.
Yeah, the links are coming in so quickly. But if I go to NSAW, will I find it?
Yep, just type in students when you get into the NASW at socialworkers.org, and it'll be the first link that pops up.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you so much,
Perfect.
guys.
Thanks,
It was
Kiana.
wonderful.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Silas.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.